There's a hedge fund manager in Greenwich, Connecticut, who has $87 million. He owns 3 homes. He flies commercial. His kids go to public school. I know this because his financial advisor told me over drinks that this guy, this actual multimillionaire, spends about $19,000 a month total. And when the advisor suggested they could afford more, the guy just said, "More what? I already have everything I want." Meanwhile, there's a couple in Austin with $400,000 in their 401k who are convinced they need $15 million to retire comfortably. They're working themselves to death, chasing a number that someone on the internet told them was the minimum for financial independence. They've never actually calculated what they spend. They just know it needs to be big. Here's the thing. I've spent the last decade running a business, sitting in rooms with accountants and fiscal lawyers who manage actual wealth, not theoretical wealth. And I've noticed something fascinating. The psychological distance between $5 million and $50 million is enormous. But the lifestyle distance? It's basically a rounding error. You're not flying private at either number. You're not collecting Ferraris. You're mostly just deciding between the good restaurant and the very good restaurant. So today I'm going to walk you through why you'll probably never need more than $5 million to live an objectively fantastic life, and why most people will need way less. We're going to look at real spending data from actual wealthy people, not the fantasy budgets you see on Reddit. We're going to run the math on what it actually takes to support a genuinely luxurious retirement. And we're going to figure out why the finance industry has a very strong incentive to convince you that your number needs to be bigger. Think of wealth like a ladder. The first few rungs change everything. Going from $20,000 in savings to $100,000 in savings is life-altering. You can survive a job loss. You can handle an emergency. You sleep better. Going from $100,000 to $500,000, still massive. You're thinking about buying a house, maybe starting a business, definitely feeling secure. But here's where it gets weird. Going from 5 million to 10 million changes almost nothing about your day-to-day life. And going from 10 million to 50 million, you're still eating at the same restaurants. You're still shopping at the same stores. You might upgrade to business class instead of economy, but you were already doing that at 5 million. The ladder doesn't stop existing after $5 million. The rungs just stop meaning anything. Let me show you the data that made me realize this. There's a study that surveyed about 150 business owners and founders across different wealth tiers. Small sample size, I know, but the spending patterns are genuinely fascinating. Households with a net worth under $1 million had a median monthly burn of around $9,500. That's $114,000 a year. Comfortable, but not extravagant. When you jump to households with 1 to 5 million in net worth and 5 to 10 million in net worth, the median spending increases to about $15,000 a month. That's $180,000 a year. Nice houses, nice cars, good vacations. But here's the kicker. When you look at households worth 10 to 20 million or 20 to 50 million, people who are clearing $500,000 to $1 million a year in income, their median monthly spend is only around $25,000, $300,000 a year. Read that again. People worth $20 million are spending $300,000 a year. Not 3 million, not 1 million, 300,000. These are not the people flying private every weekend. They're not buying yachts. Their lives look fundamentally normal. They just have really nice versions of normal things. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what if I want to spend $300,000 a year? What would that actually require? Let's build a scenario. Real numbers, no hand waving. Say you're a couple at full retirement age. You've both maxed out Social Security over your careers. One spouse is pulling in $4,000 a month, the other $2,000. That's $72,000 a year before you touch your portfolio. You want to spend $300,000 a year after taxes. Aggressive? Absolutely. But let's see what it takes. At that income level, you're looking at an effective tax rate around 35%. That's reasonable for someone pulling that much. So To net 300,000 after tax, you need about 460,000 in gross income. Social Security is already covering 72,000. Your portfolio needs to generate $388,000 a year. If we use a withdrawal rate of 4.7%, which is toward the higher end of what most research says is sustainable, you need a portfolio of about $8.3 million to generate that income. Let me be very clear. This is the absolute ceiling. This is the highest number you would ever reasonably need to live an outrageously comfortable retirement, and it's still not 10 million. It's not 15 million. It's 8.3 million. And that's assuming you're spending like someone in the top 1% of retirees. But here's where most people actually are. Let's talk about the households in that 1 to 10 million net worth range. These are high earners. They're bringing in somewhere between $325,000 and $350,000 a year. Wealthy by any definition. And they're spending $15,000 a month, $180,000 a year. Let's run that scenario. Same couple, same Social Security setup. $72,000 a year from the government. They want to spend $180,000 after taxes. Effective tax rate of 30%, which is realistic at this level. You need about $260,000 in gross income. Social Security covers $72,000. The portfolio needs to generate $188,000. At 4.7% withdrawal rate, you need a portfolio of $4 million. $4 million, not 10, not 20. $4 million lets you live like a genuinely wealthy person in retirement if you've planned correctly. And look, I get it. You're sitting there thinking, but Tom, I live in San Francisco. I live in New York. 4 million isn't enough. Except here's the thing. The data I just showed you includes people in high cost of living areas. These are business owners in major metros. They're not all living in Nebraska. They're living real lives in real places. And 4 to 5 million is covering it. Here's a story that crystallizes this. I was talking to a financial advisor in Manhattan last year. She had a client who had spent 30 years grinding in private equity. His goal was always $10 million net worth. He got to 5.6 million and just stopped. Came into her office and said he wanted to retire early. She ran the numbers and told him yes, he could retire comfortably. Then he asked, if I work another 5 years, can I afford to fly private everywhere? She did the math and said, no. You need to triple your net worth, and even then, it's not sustainable. So the guy just retired. He realized that another 5 years of stress wouldn't actually change his life in any meaningful way. That's the ladder concept again. At a certain point, the rungs stop mattering, and most people never stop to ask themselves where that point actually is for them. They just keep climbing because someone told them they should. Now here's where this gets really interesting. Let's add some complexity. What if you don't want to wait until full retirement age? What if you want to retire 10 years early, around 55 or 57? Most people assume that makes the number impossibly higher, but it actually doesn't if you understand how the math works. Let's say you want to retire early and maintain that same $180,000 a year spending we talked about. That's $260,000 gross income to cover taxes. You're gonna fund the first 10 years entirely from your portfolio. Then Social Security kicks in and takes over a big chunk of the load. For the first 10 years, you need what I call the bridge portfolio. This money has one job: get you from early retirement to Social Security without touching your long-term investments. Because this phase has a defined end date, you can use a higher withdrawal rate. Research shows that for short time horizons like 10 years, withdrawal rates around 8 to 10% can be perfectly reasonable. Let's split the difference and say 9%. To generate $260,000 a year for 10 years at 9%, you need $2.9 million in your bridge portfolio. That's your early retirement fund. It's sitting there, drawing down, covering your life while you wait for Social Security. Then Social Security kicks in. Now you're getting $72,000 a year from the government, and your portfolio only needs to generate $188,000. And here's the smart part. We're gonna use a declining spending model. Because real retirees don't spend the same amount at 80 as they do at 60. Spending naturally declines. You travel less, you eat out less. Your life gets smaller in some ways, even if you're still comfortable. So we start with a 6% withdrawal rate and assume spending declines 1% per year. To support that $188,000 draw in year one, you need $3.1 million in this second portfolio. But here's the key. You don't need $3.1 million on day one of your early retirement. You need it 10 years from now when Social Security begins. If that portfolio stays invested during your bridge years and grows at, say, 5 to 7% annually, you might only need $1.6 to $1.9 million in that account on the day you retire early. It grows to $3.1 million over the decade while you're living off the bridge fund. Add it up. Bridge portfolio of 2.9 million plus, long-term portfolio of 1.6 to 1.9 million, you're looking at 4.5 to 4.8 million total. Let's just call it $5 million to retire 10 years before Social Security and maintain a lifestyle that puts you in the top few percent of retirees in terms of spending. $5 million. That's the ceiling. That's the absolute highest number you'd ever realistically need if you're trying to retire early and live very well. Not flying private jets, not owning multiple vacation homes, but genuinely, objectively wealthy by every reasonable standard. And here's the part that makes me laugh. Go into any finance forum and you'll see people saying you need 15 million minimum to retire in a high cost of living area. You'll see people claiming that 10 million is middle class now. And every single one of those people has a vested interest in you believing your number needs to be higher. If you're a financial advisor charging 1% of assets under management, would you rather manage 4 million or 14 million? If you're a content creator selling courses on wealth building, do you want to tell people they need less money or more money? Which one keeps them watching? I had a conversation with a fiscal lawyer in Chicago who put it really bluntly. He said, "Tom, the entire industry runs on fear. If people realized how little they actually need to be happy, half of us would be out of business." He was joking, but he also wasn't. The psychology here is fascinating. There's this concept in behavioral economics about moving goalposts. People set a financial target, hit it, and then immediately move the target higher. It's never enough, because enough is a psychological state, not a mathematical one. I've watched people with $3 million convince themselves they need 8 million. Then they get to 8 million and decide they need 15 million. The number becomes detached from any actual plan or lifestyle. It's just a proxy for anxiety. Here's a mini case study to make this concrete. Let's say you're 45 years old right now. You're married, you both work good jobs, combined income around $200,000 a year. You've got 1.2 million saved across your 401ks and IRAs. You want to retire at 55. You currently spend about $120,000 a year. That's a comfortable life. Not extravagant, but comfortable. You figure in retirement, you'll spend a bit more because you'll have more free time. Let's say $140,000 a year. You've got 10 years until you want to retire. If your portfolio grows at 7% annually, and you keep adding the same amount you're adding now, you'll have about $3.4 million at 55. Your bridge strategy needs to cover $140,000 a year for 10 years until Social Security. At 9% withdrawal, that requires $1.56 million. The remaining $1.84 million grows over the next 10 years to about $3.6 million by the time you're 65 and Social Security kicks in. At that point, you're getting $50,000 a year from Social Security, and your portfolio only needs to generate $90,000. You don't need to work until 65. You don't need to hit some mythical $7 million target. You need to keep doing what you're already doing for another 10 years, and you're done. That's the actual math for a real couple with a real life. Now, 2 quick reality checks. First, let's talk about the guy who inherits $10 million tomorrow and decides he's going to live off the interest. He sees that withdrawal rates, does the math, figures he can pull $400,000 a year forever. 6 months later, he's bought a yacht. He's upgraded his house. He's flying business class everywhere. Lifestyle inflation is real and it's vicious. The spending level you think you'll maintain in wealth is not the spending level you'll actually maintain. Every single person I've talked to who came into money quickly spent more than they planned. Every single one. Second reality check. Social Security is carrying a huge amount of weight in these calculations. If you're 67 and getting $72,000 a year from Social Security, that's $72,000 your portfolio doesn't have to generate. If we removed Social Security entirely from that $4 million retirement scenario, you'd need about $5.5 million instead. Social Security is the difference between needing $4 million and needing $5.5 million. Even if you're wealthy, it matters a lot. Here's the part where I'm supposed to tell you some inspiring story about finding your enough number and living with purpose. But honestly, I think the real takeaway is simpler and darker. Most people will never do the math I just showed you. They'll chase a number that sounds big because big sounds safe. They'll work longer than they need to because they're afraid of doing the actual calculation. And the industry will encourage this because anxiety is profitable. I'm not saying everyone should retire at 55 with $4 million. I'm saying you should actually figure out what you spend, what you want to spend, and work backwards to see what that requires. You might find out your number is 2 million. You might find out it's 7 million. But at least it'll be your number based on your life, not some generic target from a blog post. 3 practical takeaways. First, track your actual spending for 6 months. Not what you think you spend, what you actually spend. Most people are off by 30 to 40%. You cannot plan for retirement if you don't know your burn rate. Second, factor in Social Security properly. Go to the Social Security website, look at your statement, and see what you're actually projected to get. It's probably more than you think, and it dramatically lowers the portfolio size you need. Third, use a declining spending model for your retirement calculations, not a flat one. People in their 70s spend less than people in their 60s, and people in their 80s spend even less. Building your plan around peak spending forever is overly conservative and keeps you working longer than necessary. The people I know who retired early and stayed retired all have one thing in common. They stopped optimizing for the biggest number and started optimizing for enough. They figured out their ladder only needed to be so tall, and then they stopped climbing. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. But knowing when to stop building the fortune, that's the part nobody talks about. Most of you watching this will ignore everything I just said and keep chasing the bigger number anyway. That's fine. At least now you know why.